So here's a question, okay, and this is like I'm gonna show you how to use Pythagorean theorem, okay, and what it's used for. If there's something this is just an expectation that you know when you come to grade 10 next year. I review it, but I don't do a whole bunch of. I just embed Pythagorean theorem in the new lessons. I don't necessarily go over it. I just use it, okay? Because I think maybe you have seen this before. I'm not sure, okay? So here's the catch, and this is very valuable, okay? Until you reach grade 11, Pythagorean theorem is going to look like this. In grade 11, we discussed where this actually kind of came from. And so the variables change slightly based on that particular scenario. But for right now, till grade 11, this is how you're going to recognize Pythagorean theorem. Okay? And really the only real rule, I think, with Pythagorean theorem is that C has to be is a fancy word. Do you know the fancy word, Greer? The hypotenuse. Has to be the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is a fancy word for longest side. Okay? And so which one on that triangle is the longest side? If you had to pick one. And I'll give you some insight too in a minute. Which one's the longest side? Which one's the hypotenuse on the triangle? Elizabeth? There you go. The long one. It's the one without any label. So it's this one, C. Okay? Now, here's a little insight. This might be new for you, and I'm not sure. I'm just giving it to you, okay? The way triangles are labeled, or not even labeled, just the way triangles are built. It's a fundamental thing. The largest angle always goes opposite to the largest side length. Okay, and then so on and so on. So then the next smallest angle, this almost looks like a 45, but anyway, we'll call this the next smallest. Oh no, it can't be. It can't be. Never mind. This, oh my goodness, we're struggling. This needs to go opposite of the next biggest side length, and then the smallest angle goes opposite the smallest side length. Does that make sense? Does everybody see what I'm saying? The picture doesn't really do it justice because the angles kind of look the same, but in reality, if I were to grab this thing and stretch it out, is that better? Let's give a better picture. That's why I was struggling too. Smallest angle goes smallest side length, goes opposite. Right? We can try and draw like arrows in between them. Maybe I'll draw them green. There we see what I'm saying? Okay. That's not necessarily common knowledge coming into grade 10. That's like that kind of goes under the radar for some reason, but it helps. And I'll tell you why it helps. It helps because should you get an answer smaller than 12? For C, I mean. When I do Pythagorean theorem, should I get an answer that's smaller than 12? No. Should I get an answer that's smaller than 18? No, it has to be bigger than your biggest side length. So it has to be bigger than 18. Okay, because fundamentally the biggest side length goes opposite the biggest angle. But also the hypotenuse is just by definition the largest side length. Okay, and so that in particular comes into play in the next question when we switch things up, which you'll see in a sec. But let's just run the math on this now, okay? So we know, try to clean this up. Biggest side length goes opposite biggest angle. So we're going to call this angle C in the corner. And sorry, I should have made little letters represent the side lengths and the capitals represent the angles. Okay, and the other two don't matter. You can call this A. This would be little a, and then this would be angle B. This would be a side length B. So we see what I've done? That's important. You'll use that again next year. Okay, so to run through Pythagorean theorem, we're just going to go, okay, well, A is 12, so we're going to 12 squared plus 18 squared has to equal C squared. Okay, so we're going to get 144 plus 324 has to equal c squared. So 468. Fun fact, that was my area code when I was a kid, 468. C squared. And from when I was like 5 through 9, that was my house phone number, 468. Remember it. You can't relate because everything's in your phone. Oh, sorry, these were all in centimeters as well. Sorry, I forgot that. Okay. So that's what C is. It's bigger than 18, so we're good. We haven't broken any triangle rules. Okay. One more and I'm done, okay? Okay, so for this question, put C in the corner, little c across from it, and the hypotenuse. Okay? And then the other two don't really matter. You call them whatever you want. You can call this one A or B. It doesn't matter. You could be at the top. Okay? And so if I were to label this, maybe I'll use the different colors here, okay? Opposite of angle A is going to be little a. Obviously, opposite of big C, we already labeled that one. That's going to be little c. And then opposite of B is going to be little b. What is little b? It's the radius of our cone, or the base, radius of the cone, the base. Right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to write out Pythagorean Theorem. Okay, and this is one that I've seen kids grade 11 mess this up. Okay, they just always think it's just like A and B are just the two numbers that are given and they're always solving for C. But you got to be careful with what you plug in where. That's the only little trick with Pythagorean Theorem. C always has to be the big one. Okay, and then you solve, you just, C's all, that's just the number one rule. C is always the big one. You just plug in it, you plug it in if you've got it, and then you solve for the other one. Okay, so for this question, I don't know B, so that's going to remain B, or you could even say it's the radius. You could call it R squared, whatever, or just call it B. I don't mean to confuse anybody. Okay, but I know A as being 25 squared, plus B squared has to equal 32 squared. Okay, and I'm just going to solve for B. So B is equal, or B squared, I suppose, we'll start with, is 32 squared. How do I get this to the other side, to 25 squared? I'm going to subtract 25 squared from both sides. Okay, and then you can do the math on it. Alrighty, I'll hit stop. Does anybody have any questions before I hit stop? Or after I hit stop, I suppose, could work too. Okay, I'll fast forward so